Good evening, pioneers. I hope you are all doing well. There's no way that I could stop on a Beatles song, so I had to let that play through. On behalf of the Cal State East Bay and Cal State East Bay Alumni Association, I'd like to welcome you to Career Boost Using Age as an Asset. My name is Travis Nelson. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement for the university, and it is my pleasure to serve as your moderator this evening. Before we get started, I want to make sure to let our audience know that we have disabled chat in favor of enabling the questions and answer feature on today's webinar. In our experience, it makes it easier for us to track questions being asked, so please be sure to submit your questions via the Q&A tab that's located on your Zoom control bar if you move your mouse over it. Also, if you would like it answered by a specific panelist, please be sure to mention that panelist's name. And I would also be very grateful if you could upvote your questions that you are interested in having answered, as that will help me when choosing what questions are asked during the end of our webinar. So all you need to do to click to upvote is the little thumbs up icon that will be located next to every question that's asked via that Q&A tab. So to help us learning um, about navigating the current job market, we are joined by a wonderful group of panelists who've graciously volunteered to share their experience and advice on how to recognize and address ageism in the hiring process. So to get this started, I'd like to give each of our panelists a moment to introduce themselves and answer a question that has been asked in advance by our attendees. That question is, are older candidates viewed as being less desirable during the recruitment process? So to go ahead and kick this off, let's go ahead and start with Susan. So Susan, feel free to unmute yourself and you can give your introduction.
Hi, everybody. My name's Susan Dittman, and I'm a senior recruiter with U.S. Bank. I've been with U.S. Bank for 5 years, and absolutely not. We love all ages in the workforce, and I think it's really important. I myself, I'll tell you, I'm over 50, and I would be considered, older versus younger. And I know that everyone is very interested in hearing about your experiences and your assets and what you bring to the table. So I would say it's really important to really acknowledge the experience you have. And we love, love, love having you at our bank or other organizations. There is some ageism out there, which we'll chat a little bit about and how you can combat that. But I'd say in general, your mindset is really important. I feel like I have a lot of things I want to do still, and I hope you do as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Susan. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass the torch over to Loraine.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Travis, for having me. I'm Loraine Bolly. I graduated in 2011, majoring in accounting and finance. I'm currently working at Ernst and Young as a senior auditor. I mainly work with life science technology companies and consumer product. I switched unconventionally from corporate accounting to public accounting in my late 20s due to certain setbacks in my career. When I started in public accounting field, I started from the lowest level as I had no previous experience in that industry. And at some points in the beginning, I did feel that I was behind older than my peers who were fresh graduates. However, in the past 2 years and a half of my experience in that switch, actually my experience and maturity gave me a good run for the demanding work life in that new career. And I feel pretty successful in that. To me, I think that age can be a problem if we want to be, like Susan mentioned, it's like the mind, it's a matter of the mindset. And if we consider it as as an asset, then it would be used to our benefit. And I'm excited to answer more of your questions today. So good to meet you all.
Salamat, as they'd say. Have to throw that out there since I'm learning. And then I'd like to pass it on to Lisa.
Hi, and Travis, thank you for having me on here. I'm Dr. Hill, and currently I'm a professor in the Criminal Justice Administration Department after spending 3 decades in the criminal justice system. I decided to take that knowledge and sort of teach and prepare students to, well, I started before I retired, but to prepare students to take my place. And in terms of answering that question, as a researcher, I had to go to the research to find out what is the saying out there? Is age an asset? And for some of you that don't know, the American Association for Retired People, which is AARP, they did some research on that. And what it turns out that that people over 50 are actually, some agencies, they desire them in the workplace. And their research has proven that older individuals bring something that younger individuals don't have. And so I'm going to give you these traits because I want you to lead with them when you go into your interviews, because you're going to go in there walking like you're the bomb because you have these characteristics. One is they see older individuals as more engaged. You're more settled. You're more apt to be into whatever the field is. You're not worried about all kind of social media and what's going on in the world out there. So you're able to focus. AARP says that older individuals are more stable. So you usually arrive at the organization with a goal. You want to be there, so you're focused on the work that you're going to do. You're not thinking, I'm only going to be here until something better comes along. Usually older individuals, senior employees, get into the workforce because that's where they want to be. Older individuals are more productive. And of course, productivity is a trait that it doesn't matter how old you are. If it's an organization, they're going to want you to produce something. It's not an emotional thing. It's really about whatever the organization is looking to produce. And then older individuals have more motivation and they want to be there. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to discuss gaps in the in your resume and gaps in the workforce. But one of the things that you will focus on is the fact that now you're actually motivated to be there. You don't have a parent telling you that you have to go out and get a job. You're not falling into the job. You're actually, older individuals are coming into the field wanting to be there. And then finally, of course, you have more experience. Not just maybe in that area, but you have experience being a worker. And a lot of folks lose jobs. In spending 3 decades, 30 years in working in criminal justice as an executive manager, I spent a lot of time on interview panels. And one of the things that they're looking for, there are people that they get the job, they look good when they sit there at the interview. And sometimes I wish I could go back and roll that tape of their interview, because I want to say, what happened to this person? But older individuals, they have experience on how to keep a job, how to get up every morning, how to act in the workplace, how to not overuse sick leave and comp time and so forth. So age can be an asset.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hill. That set the stage perfectly for the rest of this event. So I want to thank each of you for joining us this evening, and letting the candidates know, frankly, that age is not a factor in being less desirable. So I would like to pull on that thread a little bit more, because I think that it's important to acknowledge that there is some subjectivity in the hiring process. And age-based discrimination can and does still happen. So that being said, I think that it's important to recognize when age is potentially being used against you. So I'd like to turn to our senior recruiter on the panel, Susan, to answer this question. What are some signs that age is potentially being used against a candidate? And would you happen to have any recommendations on how they can go about addressing that?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking that question. So first of all, with your resume, you really only need to put the last 10 years on your resume. So that's really important. You don't have to put 20 years. of your experience, and just put in the last 10 years and making sure that that 10 years is very well described. Sometimes I get resumes and it goes back, 30 years, and I know that experience is important, but we really only need 10 years. And so kind of keep that in mind when you're working on your resume. It's also really important that, you have the mindset of learning, having agility and that kind of a thing, because I think a lot of times there are younger people that have a kind of a fixed mindset, and there are older people that have an agile mindset. So really having that mindset and being agile is so important. And then when you're applying for the positions, make sure that you fill out the application accurately and that you answer the questions honestly. That's really important as well. And then, of course, the positions that you're applying to, ideally, someone at the organization, or you'll be able to network or do some informational interviews so that when you apply, you're putting your best foot forward. I think sometimes people over 50 apply to a whole bunch of things, and they don't really think about, what do I really want to do? What's going to make me really happy? And so they're not targeted enough, and they're just applying to lots of different jobs. So I would say being really careful and knowing yourself, knowing what you enjoy doing, and also knowing what you don't enjoy doing, and applying to the kinds of roles that you feel like you really want to do. And also, that you have the skills that are going to match the application. So I think that really knowing yourself is important, and then also making sure that you have that targeted approach, and that you have the 10 years on your resume, and you really understand what you're applying to is going to make you a strong candidate no matter what age you are.
Thank you so much, Susan. I remember this being an issue in my previous role as the manager of the Office of Career and Professional Development within the university, is that idea of just throwing out as many resumes on the job application and just hoping that one will stick, right? So that tailoring, I think, is very, very important, and is a great suggestion, because I think that sometimes when rejection happens over and over again, the initial thought is it has something to do with you as a candidate, right? When it might just be you're not maybe doing being as effective as you can be in the actual process of applying.
Yeah, and I also want to mention, like, the email, you should all be using Gmail. I don't want to see any Hotmail or Yahoos on the resume, because right away that triggers your age by using that Hotmail or Yahoo. So I really encourage you guys to use that Gmail for your email, so that it just doesn't tip off people as to what age you are. And also, you don't need to put the year you graduated on your resume. We don't need to see that either. We just want to see that you graduated. If you did graduate from a college or master's or whatever, you don't have to put the years on. So you don't have to give information that's not asked for. That's another thing I would say, because sometimes people say, oh, well, and I know we're going to talk about this later, I was out of work because I was sick. And then sometimes people go way into all their health issues. I'm like, wait a minute, like, I don't need to I hope you're healthy, but don't give out too much information that's not asked for. Just really give what the question is asked, and be very specific and tailored in your answers.
Yeah, I remember working with a faculty member. One of the things that they said in pieces of advice they shared for students in the job search process was, don't give recruiters a reason to tell you no, right? So it's that idea of potentially giving too much information that might be damaging to your chances. But knowing what to look for and a little how to address it, we have to turn to what I think is a really good question from one of our audience members today. And that is, can someone with 20 plus years of experience still be viewed as a long-term asset? There's that idea of as an older individual entering into an organization, you might be getting closer to retirement age. But of course, everybody's individual plans are different. So, and especially for an individual contributor role, the person who asked this question really wanted that specified. And if they can be an asset with that 20 plus years of experience, then how can they demonstrate that value? And I want to turn to Dr. Hill first for some advice on this.
Well, first of all, when you walk into an interview, with 20 plus years of experience, especially if it's been in a particular organization, you are demonstrating your ability to be a long-term employee. And so one of the things that was a little different, and this, I'm not sure, I'll have to turn to Susan on this, whether this is overall, in law enforcement, specifically in probation and parole, when we were doing interviews, they were a little different. We had changed from those, kind of scenarios. What would you do if? And so the candidates would come up with this great answer. We went to, what have you done? And so even though it's not expected that you're going to have experience in the job that you're interviewing for, the skills that's necessary for that job, you can demonstrate that you've used them in other areas of your life. And so if someone's asking you how would you perform under pressure, you may not be able to give an example of how you perform under pressure in that job, but you can talk about how that's similar to something that you've done in your life, how you've had to respond under pressure. And so when you walk in with 20 years of experience, you're coming in showing that you are an employee or you have an ethic of longevity. And so you can, as opposed to talking about it, you've actually walked the walk. And so you would relate how you have contributed in those previous 20 years and show how it shows who you are in terms of a contributor in whatever role you're applying for.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree that, really it's, once again, it's the mindset. Everybody makes different choices for different reasons. And being an individual contributor is very important, just like being a manager is. So it's really what works for you and what you want to do. So when you come talk to me, what I care about is, are you going to be able to help solve our problems as an organization? Are you going to be a good team member? Can I count on you to show up and do what you say you're going to do? And, so I would say, try to get sort of those thoughts out of your head about, the negative thoughts, because there's so many positive things that you've done, and really understanding, before I go for an interview myself, I look at the job description and I see what are the core responsibilities. And then I give examples next to each one of those core responsibilities. I write it down. So when I go into the interview, I can say, well, given you're looking for this experience, I've done this. You're looking for that experience, I've done this. And so I really want you to focus on your skills, what you bring to the table, and then the research you've done and being up on industry practices, all that stuff really matters. So, I think there is ageism out there, yes. If you're going to work at a technology startup and everybody is 25, that's okay too, because if you have a mindset of like, I'm agile and I'm interested and I'm motivated and I have energy, people are going to want to work with you. So I think if you come to work and you show up like that, really it doesn't matter how old you are. What matters is your mindset, your attitude, your work ethic, your skills. And I would really encourage you to focus on that.
Thank you so much for your answers, Dr. Hill and Susan. I really, really appreciate that. And I'm going to turn this a little tiny bit, because a big moment of anxiety that was shared in advance by some of our alumni attending is during that interview process. And I think you touched on this, both of you touched on this a little tiny bit, but it's basically when they, that first opportunity where they get to meet their potential teammates who are interviewing them, right? And perhaps even a supervisor. So it was shared that there can be a moment of potential apprehension if all the folks across the table from the candidate are much younger. So I would like to turn this to all of our panelists for some input and advice. So while interviewing, what are ways that a candidate can overcome that apprehension that they might have, and then also demonstrate that value that we just talked about, but during the interview, right? And use their age as an advantage. So I'm going to popcorn this right back to you, Susan, to give the first answer.
Yeah, once again, I think it's so important. So I do agree, like to show up and have everybody be younger, it is kind of jarring, like, whoa. And actually, I don't think I look as old as I am. So I think sometimes people say, oh, well, you don't, but I know how old I am. But so sitting across from people and I'm thinking, wow, these people are so young. But my attitude is, I'm going to like kill this interview, right? Like I've done my research. I want this job and I know they need me and I'm going to show them how I can help solve their problems. Once again, organizations have so many issues. We have so much coming at us with competition and the rate of change, that if you come in and have that mindset of, I've done my research, I've got these skills, I can work with this team, I'm agile, all these things, that when you do that interview, don't focus on the age of the people, focus on how you can help them become more successful. That I think is the most important thing to focus on, because you can have someone who's the same age coming in and talking all about themselves and not having any of those ideas. And then when you're, an older person, you're really clear about what you want to do and how you can help them. So I think it's really important to focus on those things.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Hill.
I just want to acknowledge two things. Number one, keep in mind that age discrimination since 1967 is illegal. And so anything that happens, if there is any discrimination, you're not going to know about it. And so it's important to do your homework on an organization before you interview. So if you were to go into an interview panel and everyone was 21, 22 that was on the panel, that could be a red flag for you. The fact that they are only looking for, potentially, they're only looking for people, they're not going to tell you this, but people that are younger. And so you would have to decide what you could offer that organization. So it's really important to do your homework and look at the demographics in terms of, they have these, I know I'm going to forget now, but they have these, it's almost like a Yelp for organizations that you can look at where people actually rate their jobs. And so look and see what folks are saying about it. Do they value older individuals? And if they do, what role would you play? Because you want to feed into that role that an older individual. We have to be realistic. Because it is illegal, they're not going to tell you that they're discriminating against you. So you're going to have to do some of that front work before you get there. But that would definitely be a red flag. But it may not mean that they don't appreciate older individuals. Maybe that's just who they put on their panel. And so, but you would know that if you're able to look at some of the, I'm really sorry, you guys probably know because you may be more savvy, but there is a website that you can go to where you can put the organization in and they'll talk about some of those things, what people have to say about it. And you may even want to listen to what older individuals have to say about that organization.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hill, for pointing that out. I did put the website in the chat. It's called glassdoor.com. Yeah, and it does a great job, especially of company demographics too. They tend to provide some company demographics on there. And yeah, I love that you touched on that fact of potential bias, right? Is that sometimes people don't even realize that they have some internal bias against older candidates, but that also doesn't necessarily mean that bias is there. So it's especially tricky. So thank you so much for your answer. So I'd like to then give Loraine an opportunity to add to this. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, in addition, I agree with both Lisa and Susan about um, preparation. It's very important. I think it's not about just the age, just being prepared to an interview. And that is in all aspects, like you and the company, how do you see it, like working together, and doing all the research, going to Glassdoor, going to their LinkedIn, looking at like the company, whatever, has the company done, all of these things. And to me, like it kind of listed a few things, like first of all, like the most important thing, like which is being trying to be reiterated in the call so far, is like you have to build yourself up, knowing your strengths, like knowing the value you can give to the table, and make sure like to communicate that politely. I don't think that the moment that you are able to communicate it, I think younger like interviewers will forget about like what the ageism is at all, like if their needs are being met, like what they're looking for in a candidate, and they forget about like what the biases are. Like I mean and that's in my personal opinion. And another thing is like make sure that like what Susan said about the Gmail, I think, yeah, like making sure that you're up to date, you're agile, showing like that you're willing to learn, you're humble enough to listen, like to a younger person. Maybe like a younger person will think like, oh, if we hire an older person, maybe they will dictate over me, like, and they will not listen to the tasks that I'm giving them. But however, like being able to be adaptable and flexible and open for communication. I think that's what I can add.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much,
and
Loraine.
Travis,
Oh, go ahead,
I just
Susan.
wanted to add one more. I just wanted to add one more thing. I mean, when you get to the interview process, you're already like 90% there, right? So if you're actually getting an interview, that, as we know, is the hardest part, is getting that interview. Once you get that interview, I think you should really focus on, do I want to work here? Do I want to do this work? Like, you interview them, right? Because I mean, as I mentioned, over 50. I don't want to just go work anywhere. I want to work with a team that I like. I want to do interesting work. I want to make an impact. Like, I'm really clear about what I want to do. And so if you are very clear about those things, of course, in a humble way, not being arrogant, like I'm not going to work with you, but really having the attitude of, I know what I want. I know my values. I know what I want to contribute. Is this the right place for my skills? Is really how I think of it. And I think you should think about it as well.
Thank you so much for adding that. Yeah, I like that idea of kind of understanding what some of the internal barriers might be. So having a way of addressing that, like you mentioned, Loraine, and really highlighting how you will be an asset. So before we get to the next question, I just want to thank those of you who have submitted questions via the Q&A tab. We're getting some really good questions here. And there's some questions that we actually anticipated because many of you submitted your questions in advance, which is awesome. So please be sure to submit any questions you have via the Q&A tab. Just want to give that as a quick reminder, and we will make sure to get to them towards the end of our session here. So I'd like to turn to the topic of family, especially for those with younger children. Some of our alumni attending have said that they've left the workforce to raise a family and are now looking to get back into the workforce. And things are especially challenging right now with working from home, while children are also learning from home. You're having to wear that hat simultaneously, as there's a little bit more separation to those two roles before. So I'd like to turn to Dr. Hill for these next two questions, because you've indicated that you've been through this before as a parent. So first, how do you explain having been out of the workforce to raise a family on both your resume and during the interview? And then second, how do you keep a work-life balance currently with young children? If you have any suggestions? Thank you.
Overall, any gaps in your work history, your employment history, or on your resume, you want to be prepared with a brief statement about what that is, as what the reason for that was. Someone said earlier, you don't want to, I think it's Susan, which obviously is good advice. You don't want to give them more information than they need, and so have a brief statement. I wasn't working because I was raising my children. I've changed careers, so I had to go back to school during that time. That's a really good answer. I was taking care of aging parents. Whatever the reason is, give them a succinct response and then move on from that. For the second question, I want to add that raising kids. Now, this topic is near and dear to me because having worked in the criminal justice system, I know that the family is the incubator. And so that is a parent's most important job. And even my own experience, I can see I have 4 children, and I literally can see the difference in terms of how I raised them based on where I was in my career, whether or not I was in management, whether I was in executive management, whether or not I was, when I retired, I was a superintendent over a 24-hour facility, which means I was on call all the time. And so raising your kids have to continue to be first and foremost. So how do you do that? You have a schedule. You have a schedule, you have boundaries, and you maintain those boundaries. There is a point where you have to cut work off and you're going to spend time in your primary duties as a parent if you do have children. Now, for some of us, it means some late nights because once the kids go to bed, you're back up again, taking care of some things that you didn't get an opportunity to take care of. It may mean getting up very early, but you don't want to neglect. And as a manager, it depends on the company and the organization. I was always sympathetic to parents, whether it was fathers or mothers. If they had to take care of their kids' need, take them to the doctor's appointment. I always recognize that. And so be honest about that. I think some employers respect employees that they're able to maintain those boundaries. However, I will caution that that is something that you need to know prior to going into that organization. If it's an organization that there's no flexibility, remember, when you go into these companies, it's a business. And even though they like you and you're going to come with personality and you have all the experience on paper, in most cases, it's a business. So they need you there to produce. And so if it's a job that's not going to permit you to handle your first obligation, which again is is as a parent, then if it's no flexibility, you may want to avoid that organization.
Yeah, and I also, they say I have 2 young adults, and what they say is the days are long and the years are short, and that's so true. And nowadays, I mean, when my kids were little 20 years ago, things have changed so much for the better in a lot of ways, right? Like staying at home or being out of the workforce, it's not looked upon the way it used to be. People are much more, I think organizations in general are much more flexible about time and staying home with a parent or somebody sick or a child. So I just think it's gotten a lot better than it used to be. So also, once again, understanding your values. Like for me, my children were first and foremost. I wanted my work to support their schedule. So I always, fortunately, was able to work during school hours, but I was up at 6. I worked before they got up. I took them to school. As I got home from school, I was with them, but then I worked at night. So, we all sort of have these trade-offs. Some people want to do things in a different way, and whatever works for you works for you. And I think that's what's the most important thing is know what you value and try to align your values with the organization so that you get the support you need. Like at US Bank, we have a ton of support around like coaching and LifeWorks and flexible schedule, and really, especially now with the pandemic, everybody's working from home. And I do know the challenge is like with the school age kids, I think that is really tough. And so that is another challenge, but really having those boundaries, like Lisa was saying, and having a schedule. I used to like change my clothes. I would have my mom clothes, and this sounds kind of funny, but I did it and it worked for my mindset. I would have like my mom clothes and my work clothes. When I was working, I was in my work clothes. When I was mom, I was wearing my mom clothes. And my kids were like, why are you changing your clothes? I'm like, you know what? It works for me. I'm able to turn things on and off by doing that. It's just a little signal to my brain. So, whatever works for you, find that and just try to, do the best you can. but really have those values and make sure that the organization you work with, your values align with them.
Yeah, I really
Remember,
like that.
the days are long and the years are short. It goes so fast.
Yeah, I really like that advice. A lot of my coworkers, they know when I'm wearing a suit that I'm in my serious mode, right? I'm in my semi-serious mode right now with the polo. But Dr. Hill, I really like that you pointed out, that idea of you have a lot of choice in the organization you work for. And I think that a lot of candidates don't really think about how, if it turns out that there is discrimination within the organization, would you want to even work for that organization? Whether it's discrimination against you as a parent or discrimination against you for age or race or whatever the case is. So I think that's really important to point out that they're reflective and reinforcing of your own values. So I'm going to take another little bit of a turn here, and we're going to throw out some advice scenarios that were shared in advance by some of our attendees. So the first scenario is a newly minted college grad who is older with 5 or more years of experience and is now looking to re-enter the job market for entry-level opportunities that may be unrelated to their prior experience now that they have a degree. I know that's really long, but what advice would you give this type of candidate? And how do they leverage that experience that they do have combined with their education to be competitive for re-entering the job market as an entry-level employee? And I'm gonna turn over to Loraine if you have something that you'd like to advice that you'd like to share.
Actually, like this happened to me. After I got my CPA license, I changed my like kind of career path into more like into the public accounting side. Um, to me, on my industry, we have to understand like in the business side of things that you have to network, and I think that's how I got into the job that I wanted to get. Like I think making asking a lot of questions to all the mentors that you can, learning as much as you can, researching, knowing the industry you're getting into. Because like at that point, I know what I wanted, so I kind of funneled through how I'm gonna navigate through the things that I want to get at. So like making sure that you know what you want and do all your research, network with your classmates, like from master's degree or PhD, wherever. Um, like, and maybe utilize your LinkedIn, get your connections, like, and learn from them, like find the person you are inspired of and like ask them an advice on how I can get to that new career path you want to get. Because that really worked for me. And to date, like I have that mentor that I reached out from when I made the switch. um so like yeah, like I think that is kind of my biggest advice. It's gonna be tough, and I think like what I've already said in the past, being humble and like that you're restarting, so don't worry like if you're joining a company, an organization, as an entry level. Um, to date, actually, I take that as an asset for me, because like what was also previously discussed, um, I am more stable. I am not like, it's a very demanding job that you're entering into. You are stable to keep going no matter how hard it is. You know what you want. You're mature. You can, you know, you've already had experience to handle like stressful situations. And so like I think honestly, I feel like by doing that switch, from a different career path to what I have now, it has helped me become really successful. Yeah, like and I don't think that I would have done that from the get-go, if I started from scratch.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. I do want to highlight, the Society for Human Resource Management in their job outlook survey, they indicated that 83% of jobs are filled through direct referral. And of course, that's their membership survey, right? But that's huge. So networking is very important. And as alumni, we are part of a network of over 130,000 alumni. LinkedIn is a great place to look up folks who are working in the industries and careers that you might be interested in pursuing. And I know many of us are very supportive of pioneers, and it's a great opportunity to reach out, not necessarily ask for a job, right? But ask for some advice to help you get a job. So I'd like to then turn this over to Susan. Susan, what would you like to add?
So, I myself did this, and one thing that I think a lot of people don't think about is associations. Like every single industry has an association, right? So for myself, I used to be in the hospitality industry, and I got tired of working weekends and holidays and decided I want to transition to something else. So I thought, well, maybe human resources, because I like working with people. So I reached out to my local association, and I actually called the membership director, because the membership director people are supposed to talk to new members or potential members, right? So I reached out to them, and I said, I'm thinking about transitioning into human resources. I don't really know what I want to do, but I would love to do some informational interviews, and I'm happy to volunteer. If you guys have a conference, you need me to help in some way, I'm more than happy to do that. And they actually got me an internship, a volunteer internship with an organization. And it really, really helped. And I got to talk to people and do informational interviews. So I think that leveraging those associations and local chapters is kind of a hidden job search strategy that I think can be very effective. And then LinkedIn is so amazing. Like you can follow people now on LinkedIn, which is a pretty new feature. And I have found that by following like people that I like, the kinds of jobs I aspire to, I now follow those people. And sometimes they follow me back. And I'm, oh goodness, that's great to see that they're following me. So, and there's so much great information around white papers and groups on LinkedIn, so my LinkedIn feed is really a constant daily professional development updates. I'm reading articles, I'm following people, like every day I'm trying to enrich myself in some way. So I think that is a really great way to do the associations, go on LinkedIn, use the Pioneer network of amazing 130,000 students, reach out to fellow alums. They will try to help you. So there's lots of help, but you have to do something like every day to try to move the ball forward is also, and do things that make you uncomfortable. So becoming comfortable, being uncomfortable is an important trait that every organization is looking for.
Thank you so much, Susan. And then I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Hill. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Oh, and you're on mute.
I think you're on mute, Dr. Hill.
All right. Okay. So yeah, I agree with everything that what Susan said. This is what's important. If I am a manager and I have a newly minted college graduate coming into my organization, the first thing that I'm going to think is that I'm getting all the new information from academia, what's the best practices. You know that because you just came out of studying that. And so you're going to be of value to my agency because of that. So you're going to be a resource for me. You're going to be a gap in what we've been doing and what we refer to as seminal knowledge, old knowledge, and new knowledge coming in. So I'm going to appreciate that. And so if this experience is new and this is something that you haven't done before, that's going to raise your stock option for me even more, because what I'm going to believe is that you're coming in with passion. You have decided that this is the field that you want to come into. So you went back to school, you got the academic part of it, and you're coming in smart, book smart, and with passion. So those are two assets that the research says that agencies are looking for. So what I would say is that, you know, you go in, again, I've said this before, you're going in kind of like a boss because you're coming in with the experience that they're looking for. And at some point, if we don't get an opportunity, I have a list of, there's 5 myths that older employees believe that organizations think about them as they enter the job market. And so Loraine and Susan have mentioned, it's really about attitude. Those are two assets that are important. Newly minted, so you're coming in with good knowledge, and you have a passion because you kind of did what I would refer to as a hard reset, and you've decided you want to do something different. So honor that as you're going into your interview.
Yeah,
and
that's
Travis, if I could just add what Dr. Hill said, that, you know, it's when you're in an interview, if you say to the person you're talking to, you know, I'm not sure if you've seen this recent article regarding X. I wanted to share it with you, and I know that this is the way that you can connect with your organization. Like if you're already educating them, I mean, don't assume they don't know, but more than likely they don't know. So you can bring something in and say, and that's a huge win, because if someone gives me something that I don't know about and I'm going to get better from it, already I'm like, now that is someone I want to hire.
I love
Yes.
that. It's a great way of providing some upfront value there. So we are getting a little short on time. So I know that we're following the list of questions that we have prepared in advance, but I'm going to skip to the final scenario question. So just so our panelists are aware, we're going to skip the second scenario question to the final one. So our final advice scenario before turning to the live submitted questions is for an older adult who has been out of the job market for a while. And I know that we touched on this a couple other points, but the question has been asked as well in the live Q&A. So I just want to touch on this one more time. And it's, you know, how do you address the gaps in employment as an older adult? How do you do it on both your resume? So that way you get that 90% of the way there, you know, alluding to what you mentioned earlier, Susan. And then if the questions come up, I know, Dr. Hill, you gave a great answer to this during the interview process, but I'd like to just touch on that one more time. So turning it over to Susan to start.
Yeah, I would say, you know, once again, it's mindset. You know, we all make choices for different reasons. And whether it's something good or bad, I think it's important that you accept that's where you are, you know, and if you got laid off, you know, it's sort of like what I care about as a recruiter is what did you do after that happened? Like, how did you respond to that, right? So being able to explain, like, you know, well, I was laid off from my organization, and then during that time, I did X, Y, and Z. During that time, I volunteered. I built new skills with an association I was working with. You know, I was able to help volunteer in the community. Like, so just as long as you can talk about what you're doing. The worst thing is when someone comes to me and there's like a 5-year gap, and then they say, well, you know, I was just looking for work. So like, that's like the worst thing to say, because there's just make sure you're doing something, right? And getting out of your house and contributing or learning. Like I have a colleague that was at the bank for 12 years. He actually, unfortunately, just got laid off, and he got a Scrum certification, and it was like free through Google. So Google has all these amazing certificates that are now free. So I think that it's really important that you do something during this time, whether it's your choice or not, and that you can explain. Like if you stay home with your kids, you can say, I decided to be a stay-at-home mom for X amount of time. My in-laws, someone was sick, you know, I wanted to travel. That's okay too, right? But just be able to talk about it in a way that you feel comfortable. The hardest part is if you're uncomfortable, that's going to make me uncomfortable. And then that's going to make me question your judgment, right? So that's what we're trying to do when we're interviewing is what you do make sense to me? Is it logical? Is it, you know, are you progressing? So even if you get laid off, you can still progress. You can still learn things. You can still do things. Just, you know, but be able to talk confidently and comfortably And that's the hardest part. And if you're not comfortable, I know I lost my job 15 years ago, and it was heartbreaking, and I was devastated. But what I did is I did a lot of practice interviews. So then when I finally got to the real interview, all those emotions were kind of gone because I'd gone through the crying and the anger and all that stuff that had happened during those practice interviews. So then when I actually got to the person that I wanted to talk to, that I wanted to interview with, it was like that, all of that had happened to somebody else. So practice, practice, practice. So you do become comfortable so that you are able to put your best foot forward when you're talking to a recruiter.
Yeah, I like that. It's reinforcing that idea of becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? That idea of practice, it can really help out. And then I'd like to turn to Dr. Hill. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I want to deal with the giraffe in the room. Gaps in employment history or on resume, there's in the background, people think, was this person in custody? Was this person on drugs? Were they in a mental hospital? And so it is, as Susan says, it's really important to have a response to that. And what I'll say to the participants, what have you been doing during that time? I always encourage my students to take on internships and externships. Make sure you can say that you've actually been busy. You can say that you've been taking online classes to get caught up with the technology that's going to be used. You can say, you know, employers want to hear that you, especially if you're older, that you've been busy. Again, addressing the elephant in the room, you don't want them to think that you've been just sitting on the couch, you know, flipping through your AARP magazine. Let them know that you've actually been out there doing some things. So this is kind of a hint to that. Get out there and do some things. Talk about that you've been volunteering, you've been doing research. I've been in the library studying, you know, what the new technology is, what, you know, recruiters are looking for. So actually do something.
Thank you.
I would say go out of the house every day and do something.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Legal.
Yeah, do something legal. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all these great answers to the structured questions. So at this point in time, we will be turning to some of the questions that have been asked and upvoted by our attendees. I know some of these we've already kind of touched on and answered. So we'll be going kind of in rapid fire here. And then, you know, if someone would like to contribute an answer, just feel free to raise your hand, and I'll call on whoever raises their hand, and we'll go from there. So with the first question here is, what if you haven't worked in the last 10 years, all your experience is beyond 10 years because you stayed at home to raise your kids? I already know that we covered this pretty extensively with one of our previous questions, but would someone like to give a rapid fire summary? Okay, Susan.
So, you know, you have been doing a lot of work. You just haven't been getting paid. So let's be honest about that, right? So I would say, hopefully you can talk about maybe some volunteering you do with your kids' school, or being a team mom, or, you know, something like that, being on a volunteer board. If you don't have any of that, that's okay too. But I would say, try to do some kind of certification. Do something that's going to show you're current with something, right? So whether it's doing a volunteer certification through Google, or, you know, get up to speed on something that you're interested in so you can talk about it. So even if it's been 10 years, you know, you can also start doing some informational interviews, right? And then as Travis said, you're going to get that job from somebody you know probably anyway. So how do you expand your network? Let people know. I mean, when I was looking for a job 15 years ago, my mailman, actually, I was getting the mail, he actually gave me a tip. He's like, oh, my wife did X. And I was like, oh, good to know. So you never know who's going to connect to you or give you great ideas.
All right. Thank you so much. Would anybody else like to jump in and add? Okay, looks like we're good. Um, Perfect. So how do you respond if they say you are overqualified and will get bored because upward mobility might be limited? I'm guessing it's that idea of having more experience than the job would necessarily require, and them not hiring you because of potential turnover, which of course is one of the largest costs of companies. And Dr. Hill, I saw you unmute yourself. I'm taking that as a sign that you'd like to toss out an answer for this one.
Right, because I actually went to the research to find out what, is that still a thing where employees feel like, some people are overqualified. And if a candidate or the person that's pursuing a job has more skills or more experience, usually they're going into that entry level position because of what we talked about early. Maybe they don't want a stressful job at that point. Maybe they are raising their kids and they need a little bit more flexibility. And so I think it's okay to honor that. And so if that's a thing that's still out there and that there's a belief that you're coming in and say you have 20 years of experience, you've been a manager, and now you're applying for a job in the mailroom, just as an example. I say speak to that. Speak to what it is about you in that moment that you're going to bring to that position. And again, in most cases, it's you're looking for that. You know that you have more experience than what that job is asking for. The question is, what they want to know is, why is it that you're applying for it as opposed to a higher level position? And so there's a multitude of reasons for that. That's just where you are. That's what you want. You don't want a high level position. You've been there, done that, in other words.
And Susan, you'd like to add?
So, I've actually been in this position before as well. And actually what I did when I was interviewing is I brought it up myself, because I said, you're probably wondering why, someone with my experience would want this kind of a job, because it is, I have more experience than is needed. And then I said to them, this is exactly the kind of work I need for right now with my family. And it's going to be perfect for what I need. And I need it for a long time. So, I want to assuage your fear. I'm not going to come and just stay for a short period. I really am looking for a long-term opportunity. And I've really thought a lot about this. And I really know what I need to do to be happy and fulfilled in my work. And this is really a good match for me, I think. So that's what I did.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I know we're at 6 p.m. here. I know we started a little bit late, so I think we'll answer like 1 or 2 more questions if that's okay with our panelists. But I would like to direct everybody to the fact that the chat is now open. And I know, Bonnie, you've been sharing some good information via the Q&A. So I encourage everybody to answer or to take a look at that, because one of our attendees has been sharing some good information. And also, Loraine has typed out a couple answers here to those of you who submitted questions. So I'd like to let you take a look at that when you have a moment. So one of our last questions here, second to last question, is there's an understanding that the resume should only have 10 years. But what happens when those last 10 years have been furthering one's education? For this particular person, they retired in 2009 and have been going to school ever since. So how do you kind of address that?
You want me to answer that one?
Sure, Susan. Yeah, go ahead.
So once again, I would say, how do you apply what you've done to where you want to go? Right. So what is the alignment? So if you've been studying something that directly connects with the job you're trying to get, that's perfect. If it doesn't, then it's do your research and show the connection through your informational interviews, or show your transferable skills, right? The things because of course, education is very important. You learn certain things, certain foundational things in education. So share those transferable skills. Maybe you're going to go for a research position or a grant writing position. Like maybe you were getting your master's in something, and then this is really a writing job. So it's like, well, I've done all this work in getting my PhD or my master's. I'm a really great writer, and I want to, so pull some of those transferable skills out and talk about them to build that bridge is what I would say.
Perfect.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. You want to be honest. You want to be honest about your experience. And, Susan said something that I think is real important for me, because as a therapist, I look at social cues. And so being as transparent and honest as possible, again, don't offer more information than you need to, is going to provide you with a level of comfort that is going to be perceived positively while you're sitting on that interview. But for the previous question, I would be remiss if I didn't add this. Make sure that anytime that you're in an interview, usually, Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a point where they're going to ask whether or not you have any questions or any other feedback. Any information that would be useful. So if you haven't had an opportunity to explain the gap in your employment history, that's the time that you may want to say that. If you are just coming out of college and you're shifting gears, and that's an opportunity for you to say that also. So anticipate some of the things that you think that they may ask, or some questions they may have by looking at your history. And then if you don't get a chance to talk about it, maybe they don't ask you during the interview, then during that last period, during that last question, then you bring them back to that. So it's like you get to kind of provide the narrative instead of leaving them with the opportunity to think of what the narrative is.
Yeah, and my favorite candidates are the ones that say to me, you know what, Susan, so much of the information you share with me today gets me even more excited about this role. I really feel like I'm a good fit for these 3 reasons, and really close the recruiter, right? So that they know I really want this job. I think I can do it, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I think that the people that do that show a confidence. And I think sometimes people think, well, I don't want to come across as being too assertive, maybe some people might think, but the top candidates I talk to, they leave no doubt. I want this job, and I think I'm ready for it, and I think I've proven, and close the recruiter. Because what we do as recruiters, our credibility is only as good as our last candidate. So I want you to succeed, but I want to know you really want it, and I want to know why you want it, and I want to know how what you have done connects with what we're looking for, so that when I refer you to the hiring manager, you succeed, I succeed, and the company succeeds, and the hiring manager succeeds. So everybody wins.
Perfect. So there's one question on here that I'm going to answer really quickly, just putting on my old hat, and then Lisa, I'm gonna turn the last question over to you, because I think you might have experience in this area, especially as a teacher within criminal education, criminal justice, excuse me. So the first question that I'm going to answer really quickly is it worthwhile to pursue internships or other free work opportunities that younger people use to gain connections in our search? I'm not sure if I could sustain an unpaying job. So I wanted to just share that there have been updates to the Fair Labor Standards Act. I think it's very important to know your rights as an employee, that have made it very, very hard for employers to offer internships as totally unpaid experiences. There's now a legal component where it has to be tied directly back to receiving academic credit. So there are those in-service learning opportunities that are available, but typically they're tied to academic programs. So if you're being offered an opportunity that's, like a free internship where you're working for free, I would ask some questions about that, and really think about whether it's good for you or not, and whether they're taking advantage of you as a potential free labor source. then the other thing, the other question that I just wanted to put out there, and this one's for you, Dr. Hill, is what if you have a criminal background? No felonies, but felony charges and misdemeanor convictions. These charges were over 12 years ago. How far do background checks go? Do you have any information about that?
Dr. Hill, you're on.
Am I?
You're good.
Am I
You're
coming
good.
through?
Oh, no, you're on.
So, yeah, if it's a misdemeanor, so there's this whole legislation. There are people that's working on that right now, how to get rid of that box that you need to check if you have, in fact, sustained a felony. Usually they'll ask about, they can only ask about convictions. They can't ask whether or not you've been arrested. So, you know that you should know the difference. If you haven't been convicted of anything, you haven't been convicted of a felony, which in most cases they're going to ask you, you get to say no to that question. Know that if you have had a record, that it's real important that you go through the paperwork to have it expunged. And so employers can't look at it. Law enforcement agencies can still find it. Realistically, anything that goes in a computer can be found in a computer. It's not like the old days where they tear up the contact card. But most important, this is one of my favorite questions to be honest, because even my students ask this. When I worked as a line probation officer, that was one of the questions that came up often. You want to take a position of that was then and this is now. And so you want to focus on, if it's been 10 or 15 years ago, you want to emphasize what you've done since that time. So in other words, an employer can see a profile of a person that may have gotten arrested, may have been immature at that time, may have made some bad decisions. What have you done since that time? And so you want to be able to emphasize that you've had children, you've gone back to school. This is who you are today. That's who you were, in 10 or 15 years ago. If an employer is willing to hire you, they're going to get who you are today. So be confident in knowing that. And never, never, never not tell the truth. If you have had a felony, you need to disclose that and say that. Susan?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the telling the truth part is so important. We actually had to rescind an offer on someone who didn't disclose their DUI. And if they had told us up front, it might not have been an issue, but because they hid it and didn't disclose it, became the issue. So, we as recruiters, we always want to try to work with everybody, right? So really it's the company and background and compliance, at least in banking, that we have to deal with. Sometimes we can get an exception, right? So I would just say, exactly what Dr. Hill said, put your best foot forward, tell the truth, and people will help you, and you will be able to move forward. You just have to find the right people that can help in the right circumstance, and keep trying, because it will work. Never give up.
So with that question finished, I'd like to invite everybody to still stick around if you're an attendee, because I am going to share some resources at the end of this that might be able to help out. I'll share that via the chat. But in the meantime, I definitely want to be conscious of our panelists' time. They've already stuck around with us for an extra 12 minutes. So I want to thank each of you so much, Susan, Loraine, Dr. Hill, for spending this time helping our Pioneer alumni kind of navigate some of this uncertainty that we're all facing. And I'd like to give each of you a quick 30 seconds to close with any imparting advice that you have for our Pioneer community. So Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you first.
So I just want to share the good news. Like, as I mentioned with LinkedIn, I see so many recruiters being hired. So, you know what they say, the pandemic is getting more under control and there's going to be a siege of hiring. So, you know, I'd say in the next 3 to 6 months, things are definitely going to change. The unemployment rate continues to get lower, especially here in the Bay Area. So keep the faith and keep working hard. So that you just need one job. That's the main thing to think about. It's just one. And things are going to get better. So, you know, we're in a good place. The economy is getting better. And, you know, do that networking and reach out to people. The good news is, like, people do want to help. The hard part is you never know who's going to be that person that's going to connect you to that one job that you need. But the main thing is, you know, keep the faith, keep working hard, go outside every day, do your networking, volunteer, give back, and things will come to you. So I wish you lots of luck.
Thank you so much. And before I turn it over to Loraine for her closing, is it okay if I share each of your LinkedIn profiles with our attendees?
Yep. Yes. Feel free to reach out to me as well. Absolutely.
Perfect. So I'll also add those into the chat. But for the moment, I'm going to turn it over to Loraine.
I think for me, like, just change your mindset, be agile, over prepare, and I think just believe in yourself. Like, I think that's where it really truly comes from. Like, build all the skills that you need to have to get the job that you want and the career that you want. So good luck in your search.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Loraine. I know we have an attendee who is asking, well, a couple attendees who are asking questions about accounting. So Loraine would be the perfect person to connect with via LinkedIn to ask those questions, since we didn't get to them. And I just shared her LinkedIn profile in the chat. All right, so turning over to Dr. Hill to close this out.
Like the other panelist says, you know, good luck on your pursuit. And I have a handout that I'm going to send to Travis, if he would, to kind of send out to the participants with, you know, just some myth busters and, you know, some things to, you know, keep in your head as you go into your interview. But one thing that I want to say, because it wasn't said here, is be very careful with your social media. And because the recruiters and companies, they're going to look at that, and sometimes they develop a profile of you just based on what they see in your social media. So have a social media, because especially if you're an older worker, kind of what Susan said, I love that. I got to get rid of my Yahoo account now. But so have a social media, but be very mindful of what you put on there, you know, taking political positions and, you know, really taking any position, just kind of be neutral. So that would be my best advice.
And thank you so much, Dr. Hill. I very much appreciate it. So at this moment in time, I am going to mute all of our panelists here. We have reached the conclusion of today's events. I'll still be sharing some resources shortly, but you can definitely feel free, if you're a panelist, to turn off your video. If you'd like to stick around for a little bit longer, that's fine. If not, thank you very much once again for spending this time with our pioneer community. I'm really, really grateful to each of you and the advice that you shared today. So we'll see you next time. Now, for the rest of the pioneers who joined us today, upon exiting this webinar, all of you will be prompted to complete a survey for this event. I want to kindly ask that you please take a moment to provide us some feedback. We want to make sure that we bring new events to you that are useful to you. And I'd also really, really appreciate it if you could complete the optional demographic portion of the survey, because equitable programming is a top priority for us. And we want to make sure that our events are reaching and are useful to our entire pioneer community. You know, this is one of our first events that we've hosted that was specifically for our older alumni when it comes to the career search process. So indicating that in the demographics would be fantastic. You'll also have the opportunity to click on the link for our upcoming events, where you can register for any of our upcoming events that are hosted by the Alumni Association. But I also want to recognize that for some folks, We got some questions submitted in advance about working with a staffing company, and that may be a good option to gain some initial experience. So I'll be sharing a wonderful event opportunity that's happening tomorrow evening through the San Francisco Job Forum on how to gain traction in your job search by working with a staffing company. If this is of interest to you, we invite you to attend, as the Job Forum has been helping Bay Area residents enter the job market since 1952, which is crazy. They spent the last 70 years hosting these types of events to help the Bay Area community. So before I share those resources with you via the chat, on behalf of the Alumni Association and Cal State East Bay, I wish you all great success in your job search process and wish you all a wonderful evening. I'll be sharing those resources with you shortly.